Hello and welcome to Cruising and Musing. We're coming at you from the wormhole tunnel of space because, you know, both the cars are kind of in a bit of disrepair. Studio A is off the road getting its power steering work done. That's turning into a longer process than expected because it's got a fancy Hydro Boost system in it. And replacing the parts would be extremely expensive. So my guy is gonna try to rebuild and refit gaskets and everything to fix the system with the parts on it and try to save me $900 worth of parts. And Studio B, it's Florida. Yeah, it's nighttime, but it's kind of humid. Gas is up to it's pushing $5 a gallon. And this is like the seventh time I'm trying to record this video, so we're not going to drive out any more gas while I'm trying to talk my way through this one. That being said, this is going to be a response video to Dr. John Souza over at Eklon Education Consultant. He did a video called "What to Do with Juvenile Sex Offenders," and part of the thrust of that video was that he thought that utilizing virtual education was a good thing to do with those sex offenders. I want to 50% agree and 50% disagree. And I do this as a public education virtual school teacher. My experience has been with my district that they like to dump their criminal behavior problems off on the virtual school. And those criminal behavior problems, these are kids that have threatened to shoot up the schools, actively plan to shoot up the schools, brought weapons to school, brought excessive amounts of drugs to school, created hit lists of students, and kind of written manifestos. These are some serious trouble kids that are being dumped into the virtual school anytime their parents really lawyer up and fight back. When we already have a school that is basically a step between going to school and being in juvie or juvenile detention, that we refer to as alternative learning center, where they are there and there's guards and a larger number of resource officers present to protect the teachers that deal with these students. And if the parents lawyer up and say they don't want their kids going to that alternative learning center, they tend to dump them into the virtual school. And now you have these extreme behavior issues that were unmanageable in a normal school environment, taking up the resources and deriving away from the behaving public school students that we work with. Not to mention now, every teacher that's on the phone with these students never know whether they're being recorded or not, and the kids will try to instigate issues and things like that, and try to make trouble. It's not a burden that should all be dumped on one school. These are students that really should become the problem of the Department of Justice because they are criminal in behavior. That being said, so that's my no part of, if your virtual system has your normal public school students in attendance, they should not be a shared group having to share that student body with these juvenile delinquents. So I'm saying yes, if the virtual school is like a cloned apparatus from what the public school figured out how to operate, and they make it a Department of Justice thing, and that's how they're going to do school and prison now, is virtually, so that you can have one math teacher servicing 3 JV units or whatever numbers make sense with that. Yes, that would probably work out quite well. So that takes care of part one of putting these juvenile sexual offenders into a virtual school setting might be an answer, but only if it's part of the criminal justice system. Part two of this is that the implication appeared to be that students were committing violent sexual offenses against other students, things like rape, sexual assault, what have you. If those things are occurring, those students, and I'm sorry, this will probably be an unpopular one, students who are committing those levels of felonies, rape, murder, violent sexual assault like that, they know exactly what they're doing. I don't care if they're 11 or if they're 17, they should be getting tried as an adult and sent to, getting tried as an adult, sentenced as an adult, get sent to juvie until they turn 18 and then continue that sentence in adult prison. And nothing that is of that level, committing murder, murdering someone, raping someone, none of that should have a penalty with it of a short enough prison sentence where they'd be going back to their high school. That, the idea of a violent rapist being re-released out of the Department of Justice and sent back into a school, is just ridiculous to me. Where's the justice for the victim of those crimes? Those aren't slap on the wrist offenses. Some 12-year-old shouldn't be able to murder someone, come back to school at 16 and be in the general population. And this is why we have the differences, between manslaughter charges and murder charges. Manslaughter is an accident, and it's not like they intended to do it, so it's the chances of them doing it again are so slim. But it's, something totally different when it's an intentional crime. They have definitely shown they don't belong to be in that building with the other students. So the mere fact that that's a concern concerns me. So definitely those students should start to, it should be kind of a thing that if you're going to do, life ending, life changing, life altering adult crimes, you are tried as an adult. When the juvenile justice system was instituted, I doubt they thought that, rape would become a common thing they had to deal with out of high school students, or murder, or anything else. Like many aspects of our government and our legal system, things need to get updated and adjusted. Now, that being said, we also have to look at some of these statistics here that Dr. John was getting quite upset about. In this article, it cites that 18,900 of these juvenile sex offenders existed out of a student population of 50 million. I first want to again clarify that there is a difference between a sex offender and a violent sex offender. So for all we know, 18,000 of these juveniles, because those are mostly boys, could be jerking off in the boys' room or looking at porn on the school computer. You don't know how those things are going to get prosecuted in the different states. So I would want more specific data on what they have done, before I'm willing to assume that there's 19,000 school-aged students out there committing violent sexual offenses and victimizing others. I would want better data than that. I would want more details. Now, obviously, we would still want that 19,000 to be a much smaller number in an ideal world, but in in the real world sense, that's 0.04% out of that 50 million. So, I mean, it's a big problem, but at least it's not a frequent problem. We definitely want that number to be smaller, but what this is indicating to me when I take that and with what's said in the next paragraph down, that most of these crimes are occurring off school grounds and after school hours. It's not really the education systems that are enabling this. It really sounds like they're doing what they can to stop it from happening in the schools, and I'm sure that they can tighten it up even more. No system is perfect. You can always find improvement for it. But I don't think we can hold schools, teachers, administrators accountable for things that happen off of school property. Now we definitely don't want that, like, let's say that this happens at a football game, or, it's the star football player who's guilty of it. We don't want the, school personnel to help sweep it under the rug and, help make it okay. That obviously we don't want, but, if it's happening and it's, the school's completely uninvolved, we can't hold the school to account for it. all they're doing is, having the unfortunate circumstance that, a rapist is going to their school. And, as long as they're not interfering or trying to shelter him, they're not guilty parties in it when they're completely not involved. So that's my takeaway from this is they're, pointing out that for most of these happen well away from the school, where the school is completely powerless to stop it and therefore cannot be held responsible for it. And again, like I said, there's sex offenders and then there's sex offenders. It doesn't say here that these are violent sex offenses that are happening, numbered up to 18,900. And again, the part of me that wants to believe in the better part of humanity, and from what I've seen of student behavior, doesn't want to believe that those are violent sex offenses. I want to see the real numbers, but I truly believe that the vast majority of those are probably going to be nonviolent sex offenses. Things like indecent exposure, inappropriate behavior in the bathrooms, that sort of thing. That being said, making sex offenders register with the local law enforcement. Definitely if they're a violent sex offender, I don't think, a 13-year-old rubbing one out in the bathroom, in the middle of a swim class because he got himself worked up is something that they need to be put on a permanent list and marked for life for. It just isn't. And like I said, I'm sure from my take on how Dr. Souza was, the emotion that I heard in his voice, he may disagree with me on this, but the recidivism that's cited in this article being 14% for the juvenile offenders, that's actually an incredibly low recidivism rate when you look at that compared to criminals in general when they go to prison. The recidivism rate, I believe, is something around 75 to 80%, where if you go to jail, you're going to end up back in jail again. If the recidivism rate for these juveniles is 14%, then this is definitely working as a deterrent or as a punishment on, remediating those people or those students, those juveniles, and getting them to not repeat those acts. Now again, we would rather that number be closer to zero, but 14 is a far cry better than the general prison population. So it seems like maybe the juvenile corrections facilities are doing something right here if they're taking 86% and it's not happening again. And it almost makes me wonder, how much of the students that end up in that system could have been deterred if they had gotten real consequences for their actions prior to landing in the, juvenile system. Because that's got to be one of the biggest things I've seen as a teacher is that, the kids get really cocky that they're not going to get any consequences as they observe and, justly so observe that they're not getting any real consequences for bad behavior, not getting any real consequences for bad behavior. And they push the envelope, push the envelope, push the envelope until they've crossed the line and now the police are involved and they have a real consequence. I feel like if we came down harder on that sooner, it might not progress to that point, which I guess in that case, you could kind of hold schools responsible for not coming down harder, which might have prevented some of these 19,000 from acting out in that way. So, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at on it. So here for our recap, number one, yes, virtual school could be an option for this, but only if it's keeping the criminal population isolated from the normal virtual population. Virtual school is a very effective way to teach and learn, especially when it mirrors what's done on the collegiate level, but only for some students, and it shouldn't be required of them. Some students need the interperson interaction. My experience this year, more so than any other time, has proven to me that it's not a one-size-fit-all answer, and some students absolutely need to be in face-to-face education. Next up, if students are committing such heinous crimes as, rape, murder, violent sexual assault, dealing in child pornography, that sort of thing, or pedophilia, what have you. They should be getting tried as adults and sentenced as adults. So they shouldn't be coming back into school having done any of those crimes. Just it should not happen. They should be in prison until they're well past school age. And then the next one here is, we do need to keep in mind that when we're looking at the data in this article, that it is, that it's a very broad term, sex offender. It's not identifying violent sex offenders from nonviolent ones, or what they've done, the severity of what they've done. So that number could be partially inflated. We want the number to be as low as possible. However, when we look at it as a percentage of the whole, it is 0.04, and while we would rather that be 0.00000000001 or 0 flat out, we can't reasonably expect to get to that point because humans will happen. There's no such thing as a perfect system with humans involved, but we do want that number to be as low as possible. That being said, with the recidivism being at 14%, it seems like a lot of the correctional efforts are working. That's a way better, that's basically a flipped percentage compared to the normal criminal society. So that system seems to be doing quite well. Obviously, it could be better, and we could have smaller numbers feeding in, but that's, something to be taken here. And again, as this article notes, a lot of these things that are occurring after school hours, off of school campus. So there's only so much that the schools can do. So as long as they're not actively interfering with the investigations or hiding it, and are doing everything they can to assist the investigations, then, you can't really fault the school system for it unless it's for being too soft-handed with consequences that, develop into these kids the idea that they can do whatever they want and there will be no lasting consequences for it. But that's a completely different topic on needing to tighten up school discipline, give more severe consequences and consequences that are more direct and less rewarding to the students, because at the end of the day, if you got a kid who doesn't care about school and you suspend them for 2 weeks, all you did was give them a 2-week vacation. Whereas, if you got a kid that did something and you send him to do hard labor for 2 weeks, he's probably not going to do it again. So perhaps there needs to be a very significant update in the way that we deal justice in schools and violations. And obviously, there needs to be more intelligent things to get after kids about. We should be after kids about being abusive to each other, this sort of thing, not so much, dress code of all the silly things. You're suspended for a week because your hair's the wrong color. Who cares? It's not that distracting, especially after you get over it the first time. But they got pink hair, so what? But yeah, so that's kind of my take on this entire thing. This woman quoted at the start who said it's not a big problem. It's a big problem. The fact that it's not a widespread, frequent problem is something we can be thankful for and continue to try to reduce. But anytime it happens, it's a big problem. That's very poorly stated her way. And I'll take Dr. Seuss's word for it that she has said similar dumb things. But when I look at these numbers, again, I want a greater detail of information. And this is going to be kind of the contrarian part of this. I say this out of experience. When the George Floyd incident happened, I started doing my best to dig up and see the number of unarmed people killed by the police. And if you dig up those actual numbers, it's very eye-opening. Just when you look at how frequently it happens, Um, it's not the way the news makes it seems like there's a war declared on unarmed people by the police. It's actually very rare to happen. If I remember my statistics correctly for 2019, because that was the numbers we had in the summer of 2020, it was like a total of 11 men of all races, walks of life had been killed while unarmed by the police. And when I looked at those 11 cases, like I think it was four or five of them, the person who was shot was using a car as a weapon at the time, but was still classified as being unarmed. Um, no, it was two of them were using a car and they were still classified as unarmed. One of them had an officer trapped in the wheel well of the car and were spinning the tire against the officer, ripping them to shreds essentially when the partner shot, and the other one was using the car as a weapon. Then in another three of those, if I remember correctly, they were in physical altercations with the officer, grabbing at the officer's gun, and it was on body camera that they were doing this when the officer finally, used lethal force to stop them. And speaking as somebody who does, conceal carry when I am, out and about, for my own safety, you've seen the sheer number of homeless people in my neighborhood when I'm out walking the dog. I carry for my protection. And one of the things they tell you is that, if you're going to carry a weapon, you have to remember that even if you don't want to use it and you don't want to hurt anyone, if somebody hurts you and takes your weapon away, you've now given that person the means to hurt yourself and hurt others. So, I can't really fault a police officer shooting someone who is trying to take their gun away from them. I really can't. Because if they do get it away, even if they run away with just the gun, that's 17 bullets for most models. That's a lot of people they could hurt or kill. Um, so again, the importance of digging into those statistics, getting the raw data, the more detailed data is definitely a very important part of all of this, and doing that deeper level dive for the finesse of things. So Dr. J, I hope you watch this. I look forward to hearing what you think down at the bottom in a comment. My other folks who are watching, thank you for hanging out with me in the worm tunnel here as we dealt with this undesirable topic. And until next time, this has been Cruising and Musing. Hit the subscribe button, thumbs me up, thumbs me down, let me know what you think. And hopefully, in some of this discourse back and forth, I have given you things to think about, and in your replies, you will give me things to think about that perhaps I haven't thought of. Until next time.